Welcome to Trust Talks. My name is Alexandre Kesh, and I'm with Randy Warshaw, co-founder and CEO of Provenant today. As cyber threats evolve, the telecommunication industry faces growing challenges in securing SMSs, voice calls, and other critical communications. From SIM swapping to SMS spoofing to impersonation, the vulnerabilities are vast, and the impact on businesses and consumers can be very severe. So in this episode, we will be discussing how verifiable legal entity identifiers are strengthening the integrity of telecommunications in general. And I will now pass the mic to Randy, who will introduce himself and the company he's working on, because he's a specialist in the topic, and that's why we have him here today on the show.
Thank you very much, Alex. Pleasure to join you beyond your inaugural season of your podcast. It's a great privilege. Yes, I'm Randy Warshaw, and I have 25-year background in telecommunications. I've worked on global platforms, primarily those based in North America. I was perhaps instrumental in the growth of SMS throughout North America. Um, there was no interoperability between carriers when I started, and we built a platform that enabled anybody to text anybody else on any platform, regardless of where they were in the world. We helped very much to grow the ecosystem. And as growth happened, bad actors saw opportunities and they started moving into the space. And in 2015, I developed probably the first AI platform for detecting text messaging, scam, and fraud at scale. Um, and that still has not been enough. The problems continue. And hence, in 2020, I founded Provenant with the goal of bringing global verifiability to telecommunications. Um, I'm sure we'll get into it, but very rapidly, I saw Glyph as being a cornerstone of the solution that was missing that critical piece, which is a global root of trust. How do you know that a telecommunication that originates in one part of the world and terminates in another part of the world, who's to say who's calling or texting?
So you definitely have a history of understanding the telco world and how it works and how fraud has evolved over time. How would you say cyber threats in general in that world has evolved in the last years, or is evolving actually as we speak, with AI actually a potentially a tool to fight that, but also with AI being used as a tool now with voice impersonation, for example, to increase that fraud level in telco.
Uh, wow, that's a multifaceted question because the whole problem and the solutions to combat it have evolved quite a bit over a period of time. Um, in the beginning, people were generally trusting their phones and trusting text messages, and they weren't expecting uh, to be taken advantage of, or they weren't anticipating impersonation. I don't think people even knew that a telephone number could be spoofed. And so there was an inherent trust that was very easy for bad actors to exploit in the beginning. And, people wouldn't even notice spelling errors or weird kinds of URLs. People are much more aware of that right now. And scammers have gotten a lot smarter. They're a lot more patient. And a bunch of systems have actually been developed and been deployed, particularly using AI and other analytics, pattern matching, that sort of thing. Um, but we have a problem, which is we're trying to play whack-a-mole. We're trying to catch out of a huge volume. We're talking many billions of communications every day. And out of those many, many billions, how do you pick out the bad ones? And so analytics engines play a very critical role and they've helped tremendously, but they're a little bit of a reactive solution to it. What we're envisioning with Provenant, what we're envisioning based on Glyph and the vLEI, is a way to take a proactive approach to actually being able to determine the legitimacy of a communication before it's even the call is placed or the message is sent. So AI makes that problem even more pressing because now, in addition to AI being used to detect traffic, it's being used to originate traffic. And so the problem of being able to distinguish real from fake, good from bad, is almost impossible. I think it was Mark Andreessen made a comment about uh, visual AI in terms of images, and he was saying they're so good right now, it's impossible for the human eye practically to tell the difference between it. And the only way that we're really going to be able to tell real from fake is if it has accountability to the source. And that's where the vLAI comes in.
Can you, as you're mentioning it, explain a bit more in detail how you're leveraging the VLEI system into what you are doing? And feel free to do it through whatever proof of concept you're having or through theoretical explanations. But give us a bit more detail on how it works and how it would work.
Okay. Um, so let me answer your question a little bit chronologically in terms of how we got into it. Um, as global as telecommunications is, it's driven by national regulatory authorities. And they are the authority for what happens within a particular jurisdiction. With cross border traffic, it's very difficult to know who's calling or who's texting. It's very difficult to trust, well, who says so? That's a critical question. Um, in 2020, when I first learned of Glyph, I thought, this is the piece that telco is missing. It needs an independent global root of trust that is able to identify uniquely any business anywhere in the world. So right at the beginning, I thought, oh my goodness, here with Glyph is something that telco needs badly. Then as I began discussions with you guys and got to know you better and learned about the plans for the vLEI, I thought, of course, we need a digital version of it. Telecommunications are digital, and if we want to be able to validate or verify the origin of a call or text message, then we need to be able to do that digitally. So the vLEI uh, became the anchor. It became really the root that everything else that you need to know about a telecommunication can hang off of. So let me explain what I mean by that. The most important thing you want to know is who's calling or who's texting. So the vLEI establishes that right at the start. Another problem in telecommunications is telephone number spoofing. Now, how do you know that a telephone number is being used by the party intended to use that number? Well, if I'm HSBC and I get a telephone number, how do I prove that I'm HSBC when I'm placing a call using that telephone number? So you can't know if the right entity is using a telephone number if you don't know who that entity is. And you have to be able to establish that anywhere in the world. Now, what's very interesting in telecommunications is that on the path to trust, consumers want to be able to see branding information that they immediately recognize and that they can trust. So we're getting into a situation where brands want to be able to prove their legitimacy. When they place a call, they want their brand logo to be able to appear, their brand name, maybe a reason for the call. Um, and then we have the emergence of interactive chatbots, right? So any asset, a logo, a telephone number, a chatbot, if you want to know that it's being used legitimately, you have to be able to connect it to the entity that you think that asset refers to. Does that make sense?
Does that also includes, I guess, video conference calls as well, like the ones we leveraging here. I'm not sure you are, Randy. I hope you are. Figures shows
It's
verification of your image or your voice on this device. And I think it's important that this also evolves in that direction as well for video conferences. Definitely. Do you have do you also have discussions in that world of video conferences, or are you focusing on telco, meaning voice and SMSs today?
we are absolutely focusing on that area. There are a lot of video conferencing vendors who uh, want their video conferencing to be used essentially as the enterprise phone system. So everybody who has a seat on name your platform should have their own telephone number. So if I'm an employee in a certain company, I can use Zoom, Teams, RingCentral, WebEx, whatever, to not only interact with my colleagues or associates, but I can make a phone call with it. Now, that doesn't happen easily in the telco infrastructure because the telco infrastructure currently has no way of verifying that that call coming from that number through Zoom is actually Randy, the CEO of Provenant, right? So it's essential to the growth of these new platforms, which are generally cloud based. And because they're cloud based, they're not necessarily located within a particular territorial jurisdiction, right? So we really have the problem right now of in the old world, it was kind of easier to know this carrier operates in this territory, therefore I can contextualize the call a lot easier. Everything is fluid now, and we need a much more fluid uh, and expressive way of being able to convey uh, the critical things that we need to know if something's real or fake, legitimate or not. So, yes, we are actively working on that.
Excellent. So you highlighted, so you were mentioning about uh, how important it is for companies to be able to prove they are the company they pretend to be. And you highlighted that the value of vLEI is also about individuals acting on behalf of the company. And I think that's quite important. It's not only about making sure that I'm talking to Coca-Cola, but I'm talking to the CFO of Coca-Cola in some circumstances to ensure there's no fraud. So it's quite powerful indeed. In terms of, I don't know how much you can share about what you've been proof of concepting or piloting it today, but can you maybe share, if you can, without necessarily mentioning the companies, a very, very specific use case that you're currently trying out and leveraging the vLEI for?
One of the features of the vLEI is what you just mentioned, the ability to not only prove who is the enterprise that I'm dealing with, but who is the representative in the enterprise that I'm dealing with. And that representative could be the CEO. It could be somebody from a fraud department from your bank calling you. It could even be an automated process that's running, and you want to know that it's coming from that entity. So, what we're really talking about here is organizational identity and how an organization is able to delegate authority or even assets um, and project its identity through its representatives. The fact that the vLEI has been built on a technology that supports being able to chain authority down through an organization, that's able to actually link facts back to some root, whether it's an organization or ultimately Glyph. You can extrapolate that and transpose it over to something like a telephone number. Okay. So, a scenario where a regulatory authority controls phone numbers in a country. They allocate phone numbers to a carrier in their country. That carrier may want to provide telephone numbers to another party that really wants to make telephone numbers more broadly accessible, maybe even outside the jurisdiction if we're talking about a cloud call center or a contact center. So we are currently working on a trial that addresses this exact problem. How can a national regulator provide telephone numbers to a local phone company? How can that telecom company in that jurisdiction allow the use of that number, let's say to a, a web conferencing software, like I said before, and then have that call. So the telephone number has now been delegated from the regulator to the carrier to an enterprise. And now the enterprise makes that call, and it may come in through another route back into that same country that the regulator operates in. How does the regulator know that that number is being used correctly? Because it's coming in through, let's call it a non-standard today. It's considered non-standard route. Hopefully, it will be very standard and typical in the future. So in the same way that a vLEI is able to say from this enterprise, which is the root, here's the CEO, here's the customer service rep, here's an automated process that's sending out a text message, you need to be able to chain that delegation. We're doing the same thing with telephone numbers. Um, and let me just expand on it slightly more, which is if I'm a multinational corporation and I'm operating in one country and I've got a call center in India, Bangladesh, wherever, um, how do I delegate to them the use of my phone number, the use of my brand logo to show on my calls? So the whole issue of organizational identity and how do you delegate the authority to do certain things or use certain assets, that's where everything comes together under the same technology, really, that Glyph has selected for the vLEI. It's a very expressive and cryptographically secure mechanism, and that's exactly what the world needs today.
And how what are the complexities that you're facing today and maybe the telcos are facing today in using that system, which is as if I have to trust you on that is and us because we promoting that ecosystem obviously is the solution to the problem. So why is it not progressing faster than what it is? Is it because it's new technology? Is it because it's a new approach and it requires mindset change and the way you're doing business? Where does it sit?
Exactly. It's all of those things. I mean, um, to change an industry takes time. I've been working, as I said, since 2020 on this, and I often describe uh, my work or my path. I consider the industry to be like a big elephant, and if you know that story of like the blind people, touching the elephant, every part of it feels different. In telco, every part of this elephant has a different shape and size and feel, and it responds to different things in different ways. And I've spent almost 5 years now basically going around the industry, circling the elephant, p- 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 pushing, pulling the tail, pulling the tusk, grabbing the ear, giving the leg a little push until finally you begin to see that whole elephant begin to move in a particular direction. It simply takes time. The technology is unfamiliar. It takes people a bit of time to understand it. I think I made a mistake perhaps early in the beginning, um, which is that I thought people had to understand the tech first before they could understand how it could be used to provide the solution. And I realized that that was not going to be a successful approach. So we very much started changing our narrative to addressing as specifically as we could. Here's the problem. Here's what's needed for the solution. You need to be able to prove delegation and you need to be able to see the chain of evidence. I started using terms like a data supply chain. because people understand supply chain in the trade sense of it, but in fact, a telecommunication is something that travels through a lot of networks and a lot of junctures, and there is a data supply chain to that. Even what I said about a telephone number, it goes through a sequence, and that's a supply chain to get to the user of it. Um, so it's taken quite a while to, first of all, connect with all of the different parts of the ecosystem to figure out how to refine the messaging and have it make sense to them. And at the same time, to build a solution where we could demonstrate it and people could see it. And that's the point that we're at right now, is that if you mention the LEI or glyph in the telco world, people will know what we're talking about now. That's taken a long time for that to happen. It's almost a given. Now we're trying to get people to move, quite honestly, from the LEI, because that kind of made sense to them. Oh, put the LEI in, and now we know who the entity is. But that's not cryptographically provable. So it's really just been a lot of steps and a lot of stages, laying the groundwork, being able to answer questions from very, very technical people or, um, business folks who are they need to explain it to their customers. So it's just taken time. The technology is very, very deep and very, very sophisticated. Um, I tell my team we want to bury the tech in the sense that that's not the feature that you want to put up front. And you don't want people to have to think in terms of the technology. You want to think you want them to think in terms of what's the work I'm trying to get done. Hey, I need to use a call center. I need to give them my numbers. I want them to use my logo, whatever. How do we do that? So to build the software that allows people to perform the work that they have to do in an intuitive way, there there have frankly just been a lot of pieces of the puzzle that we've had to work very hard on putting together. And now we're about to launch trials. So
So show them the car, not the engine.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Simply show mechanics you're interested in the engine, but if not, you aren't interested in the car and what it can bring to you. Makes a lot of sense, and I think it's exactly the same challenge that I had personally with selling digital asset and blockchain to financial institutions. If you start talking too much about the technology, you go nowhere. If you start explaining the benefits and the use and the user the value of using that technology, you're better off always. Thank you. Um, that sounds good. So how ready do you think the telco industry is to use that in that technology? What is what are the next steps? Where are we going in? What will it look like in 5 years from now? Let's say.
oh, what will it look like 5 years from now? uh 5 years from now, you're going to basically be able to tell, is this verifiable or not? And if it is verifiable, does it verify? Okay, that simply doesn't exist today. And again, we have to go beyond the human eye. We have to go beyond trusting third parties. We need every end user, every entity in the data supply chain to be able to verify the legitimacy of it all the way through. So I think that that's where we're headed. I think AI will continue to proliferate, and it will add to it will enhance our experience greatly, but we still need to be able to determine real from fake. And right now, um, legitimate enterprises are suffering significant reputational damage by impersonation. And so it's an urgent matter that we have to deal with. So if you look at the tension between reputational damage from impersonation and regulatory constraints because they don't know how to create the kind of flexibility that supports new technology, um, there's a great and urgent need right now. So we're about to launch a trial, uh, knock on wood, before the end of March. We'll be launching it. I don't think that the trial will take that long in order to prove out our capabilities. These are with large, well-known companies, so I think the impact will be significant for them. And I see us launching certainly before the end of the year. That'll be in the voice market, and I think other markets will follow very, very quickly. Um, the industry desperately wants to move to what's called branded communications, where you can, you recognize at a glance that this is the entity that I'm dealing with. And I'm in the middle of a meeting, but I'm going to pick up this call because I immediately recognize who it is. Or I know who it is, and I don't want this going to voicemail. Therefore, I'm going to step out of my conference room and pick up the phone. So, branded communications, I think, is what enterprises want, and it's what consumers want.
And I agree with you. I have a phone number in France, and I'm receiving at the minimum 7 calls per day of telemarketing and probably scammers as well. And I end up not responding to my phone anymore. That's my only way of preventing, and only the interested parties will send me an email afterwards, or will try again, or will leave me a message. But if we can't use our phone anymore because of those issues, it is a problem. And clearly we are big supporters of what you do, because it will help with that as well, hopefully. So you anticipate a future actually where um, I will not respond to an email like I do today. I will not respond to a phone call if I don't see the brand, right? That's pretty much what people will do, and that will push
Yes.
everybody that direction, because otherwise nobody's going to respond to their phone calls. Okay, that's quite interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
Going beyond your worlds, let's say, can you maybe share your other use cases that you've been looking at for vLEI that you think are quite interesting? And it's very open as a question. It's not part of the list we discussed. Just uh, I'm interested in your views.
Well, we created a document. Let me back up before I get into it. Provenant's vision was always telco. And as I began, I realized, oh, if we want to do this, we've got to do this other thing first. So the other thing first was we wanted to base a solution on vLEIs. And then we realized, well, we have to be able to issue vLEIs at scale. So now we have to create some software that will let us issue vLEIs in a very streamlined way. Okay, so we did that. Then we thought, okay, well, I don't want to create a solution where I can just sign a text message. I want to be able to sign any kind of thing. And for that matter, I should be able to sign a document. It's just a digital artifact as well. So we developed a document signing solution, and then Glyph was pleased to use it for their annual report, and others are interested in that solution. That solution is quite interesting and worth mentioning briefly because um, so we took the annual report of Glyphs in IXBRL format, and that's a extensible business reporting language format. It's a markup language with tags in it. And within Glyph's annual report, it's quite interesting use case because you've got a CEO statement or chairman statement, you've got a marketing statement, you've got a lot of different sections to it, including a financial statement. But Glyph needed the financial statement to be signed off by its auditors. And the auditors can't sign the document as a whole because they can't audit a marketing statement, right? So XBRL was a really excellent way of proving the granularity that's capable with the vLEI and signing. Namely, we could designate facts within the financial section that, just to identify as an example, you needed to know who prepared that financial report. Then you need to know, has the CFO reviewed it? Has the chairman reviewed it? Then have as the CEO signed off on it? Have the auditors signed off on it? You really need about 5 to 7 people to put their mark on a particular fact saying, I'm accountable for this piece of information. The fact that you can do such a thing like that is exactly the kind of expressiveness that we need in the kind of digital world that we're heading into. So if you look really at any piece of digital data and you begin to ask yourself, what do I need to know about this data? And who says so? I often joke, well, there's a wonderful company out of Australia. I'll give a little kudos to right now, called Sezoo, Sezoo. And I love their name. It's like, says who, right? And so they are committed to answering the question of says who. If you have data that can be fabricated and synthesized through AI, and that's the world we're heading into, we need to be able to tell we need to be able to treat digital data as evidence. We need it to be able to be backed by evidence. So that's the approach that we're taking in telco. But you can take that to healthcare. You can take it to supply chain, as I mentioned. You can take it to financial transactions. In every instance, you want to know, where did this data come from? How did it get here? And how do I decide what to do with it? Those are really the three core questions that we want to be able to answer. So, what I'm really excited about that Provenant has done is not only do I think this is immediately relevant to telco, but it's a model for what needs to happen in many digital realms. And I think that hopefully people will be able to take what Provenant is doing in telco and say, oh, I see how I could apply this to another digital realm where my business is operating in. So if we have an ambition, and if I have an ambition over 5 years, it would be to see that happen. And of course, at the root of it, Provenant will be successful in telco. So
Well, I'm definitely not hoping for it. I'm sure it will happen. And what I also like about what you just explained, the multi-industry use case, is that that's also the beauty of the vLEI system. It's reusable. So with a vLEI that you use in the telco world, you can reuse the same vLEI and the same credential system to apply it to finance, to supply chain management, to whatever you want, really, in a very autonomous way. And that's what excites me personally in that journey, is that reusability. You don't have to rely on a specific organizational identity system for one platform, and then another one for another platform, and then a third one, and a fourth one, and fifth one, which becomes completely unmanageable, more easy to go around and fake because it's too complex. Here you have a system that applies across industries and 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 works for every industry. So that's very good for us in terms of use case and value of the system for everybody. So I wanted to ask you a last question before we close: is anything you want to say really to the audience, and that hopefully will be larger, as it is our first year of Trust Talks. What would you want to do? What would you want to say to your industry, the telco, or to our audience more generally?
I think we're entering a very exciting era right now. I think that there are so many technical innovations that are happening right now. Um, and we have new tools available to us today that we didn't have even just a few years ago. And those tools can be used for good, they can be used for bad as well. And so we need a complementary set of tools that help us to make, let's call it evidence-based decisions about our digital lives and our digital relationships with each other. Um, so I'm very happy to have gotten involved with Glyph when we did, and to have been able to participate in the launch of the vLEI as a QVI, um, because I think that what we have here is a new set of tools that are going to help us live uh, have a much better experience in our digital lives, to build enduring relationships with other people, more trustworthy relationships. I think it will open up international communications, uh, transportation, transactions, right? We are in a global world right now, and it's largely digital. So we want to be able to embrace that digital world and to do it in a trustworthy way where we can distinguish between what and how we want to interact with and what we don't. So I'm very excited.
This is the best conclusion for this talk. Thank you so much, Andy. We thank you for participating to this first meetings and first sessions that we will organize throughout the year about organizational ID, about verifiable credentials, and how we can reestablish trust. And that's why it's called Trust Talks. That reestablish trust in the digital world that is being lost as we speak because of scams, because of all those challenges. And I thank you for your contribution to the industry as a whole and to the life in particular. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you very much.